I've always wanted to do a video about World War One, but always felt intimidated by the sheer size and scope of the conflict. How could you possibly do a thorough, comprehensive job of covering such a massive, all-encompassing conflict? Well, the solution presented itself to me when I came into possession of this book, The War Diary of a Soldier on the Front. Now, he's not a particularly special soldier, he's not done anything extraordinary, he's not very famous or well known. By all accounts, he's a very ordinary soldier from an ordinary family in Leeds. And I realised that if we follow the life of this one man through his diary, we actually get a glimpse into the wider war as well. So that's what I'll be doing. Now, his diary ranges from 1916 to 1919, but to make things a bit more concise and focused, I'll only be covering a 5-month period in 1916, known more famously as the Battle of the Somme. Now, historians can debate the tactical significance of the battle, whether it was really that important, and it does undoubtedly overshadow a lot of the rest of the war, but I've chosen it simply because it's the most culturally significant to us. So this video is a story of the Battle of the Somme through the eyes of a soldier in the West Yorkshire Regiment. So, Richard Hepper was born in 1892 in Leeds, aged just 24 at the time of the Somme. He worked for his father's firm before volunteering for the West Yorkshire Regiment. Now, the first day of the Somme is infamous for claiming over 19,000 British and Empire lives in the space of a few hours. Fortunately, Hepper wasn't actually involved on the first day, as his troops were still moving into position. But everyone obviously knew that something big was coming, so how did he record the momentous events of the 1st of July in his diary? Well, he writes, "The battalion arrives at 10 a.m. Everyone seems pretty satisfied. The great offensive started on July 1st. Well, that's a bit underwhelming really, isn't it? The news of the casualties hasn't filtered through, nor it seems any news from the front. Unbeknownst to Hepper, on that first day, when the British sustained 50,000 casualties, Yorkshire was the hardest hit region with 9,000 casualties." This lack of clarity surrounding the events is a recurring theme both in the diary and in the general reporting of the war in the press. For example, on July 3rd, the Yorkshire Post reported a great British attack in France. German defences broken between the Somme and Ancre. German casualties were very heavy, whilst the British were comparatively light. This is me editing. Now, I'd have really liked to include the actual newspaper clipping for that segment, but unfortunately the British Newspaper Archive is a subscription service which charges at least £80 a year just to view old newspapers. It's another example of the ways in which working class historians are limited in their ability to access historical resources and therefore unable to participate fully in historical work. Later in the diary we read, "We see the remains of the Leeds pals who were just passing through. We understand that they went too far in their attack on July 1st and the Boche came up behind them. Whatever the story is, they were very badly hit in the taking of Serre." They were indeed very badly hit. In the space of about 10 minutes, 248 men of the Leeds pals had been killed. However, the description of the event is incorrect. That's to be expected with the confusion of war. What really happened was that the Leeds pals were bombarded in their trenches and then mowed down by machine guns as soon as they advanced. Only a few managed to get to the enemy's barbed wire. Later, when the defenders emerged from their trenches and started clearing the bodies off the wire, they killed any who were still alive. This rather depressing moment is tempered slightly by a charming little story of buying strawberries in a village and chatting to a young French girl. We see throughout the diary moments of chaos and brutality punctuated by moments of peace, tranquility, and often the sheer banality and boredom of war. Over the next few days, Hepper's forces arrived behind the Somme battlefield, and for the rest of July we get a series of small vignettes about various experiences in the war. How strange everything appears. This is our first experience of any offensive. On the other side of the valley are 1 or 2 squadrons of Indian cavalry awaiting their turn. Much excitement prevails and we conclude that we are going to win the war. Around 2.5 million men from the Empire served in British forces, with over 1 million of them from India. It's really important, I think, that Hepper's recorded this, because the media we consume can often lead us to ignore the role of Empire forces in the war. Every village is a heap of ruins, and every wood has the appearance of a mass of broken telegraph poles. The battalion is stowed away in this trench, which is really a communication trench, with crumps and other unpleasant things falling around. All the shell holes appear to have a number of dead in them, mostly killed Scotchmen. A gigantic Scotchman and a German are locked together in a deadly embrace. Throughout the diary, we get very dry references to casualties, deaths reported perfunctorily and without much emotional comment. Military necessity, perhaps, don't dwell too much on mortality. But this matter-of-fact approach can often take us by surprise. If we read on the 29th of July, "Poor Dykes, brother of the man in Helmsley's shop, Headingley, has his head blown off." Dykes, I later found, was Sergeant Edward Dykes, buried at Thiepval Memorial. "Goodbye, boys. A wee tot more of rum. Cheerio, and over the top the 12th Battalion of the King's Liverpool Regiment go. All men smoking cigarettes, and one can hardly realise that a proper attack is in progress." We arrive at Barnefay Trench. What a sight! The sunken road near the trench is strewn with dead men and equipment. Horror and horror! The barrage has been put down along the road. God, this is awful. Shall we ever get out alive? I believe I wrote a short note home a few minutes ago in a scrap of paper to relieve my feelings, but whether I shall post it remains to be seen. News is slowly filtering back. An officer of the Liverpools, then a runner, and so on. No one is in front of us except a small post. The attack has failed, and only a few of those who left this trench this morning have got back. Only about 40. Poor brave lads, Liverpool Pals Battalion. Unbeknownst to Hepper, of the around 2,000 Liverpool Pals Battalion soldiers who fought that day, over 1,000 of them would be dead, wounded, or missing. It is useless putting into writing the sights I have seen today, for they will ever be in my mind as a memento of July 30th. We've been relieved, but I am too dazed to remember how. We are clearly seeing the emotional impact of the war taking its toll. The next day, he describes a shell attack. It came down directly onto one of the men, cutting him completely in half. Never, I believe, has a battalion moved off so quickly. Everyone I know wanted to bolt, and it was only strict discipline that kept the battalion in hand. I am sure I wanted to bolt more than anyone. It's quite touching, really, seeing the emotional honesty here, of hearing someone say, yes, I was terrified, I was scared. It's something we perhaps don't often associate with soldiers. A lot of this diary is actually filled with incredibly mundane things, moving places, setting up camp, very dry details which we wouldn't particularly find exciting. But we are often given rare moments of humour, as found in this description. Just a word on cooks here. Is the mess cook a naturally brave man by nature of his job? In the heaviest bombardment you will find the cook slowly stirring his soup or frizzling bacon, oblivious of the fact that shells are flying about. He is always the man who lights a smoky fire to draw the attention of the enemy. On the 27th of September, after 9 months, the battalion would go and leave, and Hepper returned to Leeds. He would hop frequently between France and Leeds until finally being demobilised in 1919. The Battle of the Somme ended in November, having gained about 6 miles worth of ground, at the cost of 400,000 British and 200,000 French casualties. The West Yorkshire Regiment alone lost 3,000 men in the battle, with thousands more wounded or missing. Throughout this diary, we've gained insights into the horror and humour of war, with entries ranging from the poetic to the mundane. What's interesting and unusual is that Hepper remained in Europe for some time after the war ended, so I'd just like to finish by reading this extract from 1919. As the sun sets over the city of Cologne, so does it set over an epoch in my career. 4.5 years have slipped by since 1914, and I go back to make up those lost years. Lost in one sense, yet gained another, for have I not learnt to realise the sterling qualities in my friends, learnt a little more confidence in myself, gained a wider outlook on life and learnt that might is not always right. I draw a curtain over times in which there have been many glimpses of sunshine through the thunderclouds, and I look forward to the happiness of peace. The end.